The desert stretched endless under the merciless sun, its red rocks bleeding heat into the shimmering air. Vultures circled overhead, their shadows dancing across the cracked earth like dark omens. The year was 1873, and the Arizona Territory knew no mercy for the weak. Chano moved through the canyon with the silence of his Apache ancestors, though he claimed no tribe now. Cast out for reasons that still burned in his chest, he existed between worlds, too Apache for the white settlers, too tainted by association with whites for his own people. His moccasins found purchase on rocks that would have sent a cavalry soldier tumbling, his dark eyes reading the land's secrets like scripture. The smell hit him first, blood and fear, sharp against the sage and dust. His hand moved instinctively to the knife at his belt as he rounded a massive boulder. What he found made him pause. A woman lay crumpled in the meager shade of a mesquite tree, her breathing shallow as a dying rabbit's. Her dress, once fine blue cotton, hung in tatters. Blood had dried dark on her arms and face, and her feet were bare and torn from running across the unforgiving terrain. But it was her features that held his attention, the high cheekbones that spoke of indigenous blood, the olive skin that whispered of Spanish heritage, all framed by hair black as a moonless night. Chano crouched beside her. Checking for weapons, first survival demanded caution, even in mercy. Finding none, he pressed 2 fingers to her neck. The pulse fluttered weak but stubborn against his touch. She'd been running hard, that much was clear. From what? He could only guess, though the hoofprints he'd passed a mile back suggested she hadn't been alone in these canyons. He reached for his water gourd, but as his shadow fell across her face, her eyes snapped open, green as spring cottonwood leaves, wild with terror. She tried to scramble away, a wounded animal's instinct, but her body betrayed her. A cry escaped her cracked lips as she collapsed back into the dust. "Easy," Chano said in English, then Spanish, keeping his voice low and steady as he would with a spooked horse. "No harm." Those green eyes fixed on his face, taking in his Apache features, the traditional dress mixed with traded cloth shirt, the weapons at his belt. Something shifted in her expression, not quite relief but a lessening of immediate panic. "Water," she whispered, the word barely audible. He brought the gourd to her lips, supporting her head with practiced care. She drank greedily at first, then slower as he pulled it back, knowing too much too fast would sicken her. Up close, he could see the bruises darkening her throat, the defensive wounds on her hands. Someone had fought hard to survive. "Thank you," she managed in accented English. Mexican, he guessed, though educated. Ranch family, maybe. "Please, just leave me here." "You'll die." It wasn't a question. The desert would claim her before nightfall, and they both knew it. "Then let me die." Her eyes closed, tears cutting channels through the dust on her cheeks. "It's better than going back." Chano studied her torn dress, the pattern of injuries, the desperation in her voice. He'd seen enough to understand. Someone had hurt this woman, hunted her into the desert. The question was whether helping her would bring trouble he couldn't afford. A lone Apache harboring a Mexican woman. It was the kind of thing that got men hanged in these territories. But leaving her went against something deeper than caution. His sister's face flashed unbidden in his memory, another woman left to die. Another choice he'd failed to make in time. "Can you ride?" he asked. Her eyes opened again, confusion replacing despair. "Why would you?" "Can you ride?" he repeated, already making calculations. His horse was hidden in a draw 1/2 mile north. They could make the sacred canyon by midnight if she could stay mounted. Yes." She tried to sit up, gasping as the movement pulled at injuries he couldn't see. "But you don't understand. They'll come looking. Captain Harding, he won't stop. He can't let me—" She broke off, her hand moving instinctively to her ribs. Harding. Chano knew the name, a cavalry officer with a reputation dark as dried blood. If Harding was hunting her, She'd done more than simply run from an unwanted advance. "Let them come looking," Cheno said, surprising himself with the words. "The desert keeps its own counsel." He stood, decision made, and carefully lifted her. She weighed little, bird bones and determination. As he adjusted his hold, her dress shifted, already torn beyond modesty. His hands accidentally pulled at the ruined fabric as he tried to preserve what dignity remained. And that's when he saw it. The scar branded into her skin just below her ribs was still angry red, though healed enough to show it wasn't fresh. The symbol, a crude H surrounded by a circle, had been burned deep, meant to mark ownership like cattle. His stomach turned as understanding dawned. This wasn't just escape from assault. This was escape from something far worse. "No," she whispered, trying desperately to cover the mark. "Don't look at it. Please don't." "Isabel," she gasped out, as if her name was all she had left to give. "Isabel Delgado." "I'm taking you somewhere safe," Cheno said, his voice harder now, edged with an anger that had nothing to do with her. "Can you trust me that far?" She studied his face for a long moment. This Apache warrior who'd found her at death's edge. Whatever she saw there made her nod once. "Then we go now." As he carried her toward his hidden horse, the desert wind picked up, erasing their tracks almost as soon as they were made. Behind them, the vultures descended to investigate the abandoned spot, finding nothing but blood-spotted earth and the tattered remnants of blue fabric caught on mesquite thorns. Miles to the east, Captain Samuel Harding stood over the body of his sergeant, the man's throat opened by a desperate woman's stolen knife. His pale eyes, cold as winter frost, turned toward the western canyons. "Find her," he told his remaining men. "That Mexican witch has my property branded on her hide, and she knows too much to live. Bring her back breathing if you can. If not," he smiled, an expression devoid of warmth, "just bring back proof she's dead." But Isabel Delgado was no longer alone in the desert, carried in the arms of an outcast Apache warrior. She was heading toward canyons the cavalry feared to enter, toward a sanctuary older than memory. The brand on her skin still burned with shame, but for the first time in months, she dared to hope it wouldn't define her fate. The sun began its descent, painting the rocks in shades of blood and gold. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack, and in the vast silence of the desert, two damaged souls moved toward an uncertain salvation, leaving the civilized world's cruelties behind them. The sacred canyon revealed itself like a secret whispered by the earth's narrow entrance hidden behind fallen boulders, opening into a sanctuary where water still flowed and ancient cottonwoods offered shade. Cheno had carried Isabel the last mile when she could no longer hold herself upright on his paint horse, her body burning with fever. He laid her on a bed of sage and soft grasses near the spring, the sound of water a blessing in the desert silence. Her eyes fluttered open as he worked to clean her wounds with careful hands. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw. "Just end it. I'm begging you." Cheno paused, meeting her gaze. "Why?" "You saw." Her hand moved to cover the brand, though fabric still hid it. "You saw what I am, what he made me. No decent person would—" Tears came then, silent and devastating. "I saw a scar," Cheno said simply, resuming his work. "Nothing more." "It's not just a scar." The words tumbled out, desperate and broken. "It's proof that I belong to him, that I'm his property. He said he'd hunt me to the ends of the earth because I bear his mark, that everyone who sees it will know I'm soiled, ruined. His—" "Stop!" Cheno's voice cut through her spiral, firm but not harsh. "Captain Samuel Harding is a liar and a devil. His words are poison. Don't drink them." Isabel stared at him. This Apache warrior who spoke of Harding with such certainty. "You know him?" "Know of him." Cheno wrung out a cloth in the cool spring water. "Fort Buchanan, 2 winters ago. His men came through our winter camp while the warriors were hunting. Said they were looking for raiders. His jaw tightened. Found only women and children. My sister was 14. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. She fought. Cheno continued quietly. Died fighting. Harding was there, giving orders. I know his face, his voice. Know what kind of man puts his mark on another human being like cattle. Isabel turned her face away. At least she died clean. No. Cheno gently turned her chin back. She died brave. As you live brave, the mark doesn't change that. I'm not brave. The confession came out choked. I ran when he came to the ranch, after he killed Papa, burned everything. I should have died fighting too. Instead, I let him. She couldn't finish. You survived. Cheno corrected. That takes its own courage. Now tell me why he hunts you so hard. A man like Harding doesn't chase escaped prisoners into Apache territory without reason. Isabel was quiet for a long moment, gathering strength. Papa kept records, hidden. He was educated. You see, came from Mexico City before I was born. He wrote everything down. Always said the pen was mightier than the sword. A bitter laugh. Swords killed him just fine. What records? Proof. Her green eyes blazed with sudden fire. Proof of what Harding's been doing. The Apache raids that weren't Apache at all, soldiers dressed as warriors. Attacking settlers to justify more military action. More land seizures. The government contracts for supplies that never arrived. Sold instead to Confederate sympathizers. The women taken from Mexican settlements, sold south. Names, dates, amounts. Papa had it all. Cheno's stillness was absolute. Where are these papers? Hidden. Papa was clever, he knew they'd come eventually. The night before, he told me where, made me memorize it. She touched her ribs unconsciously. Harding tried to make me tell. That's when he marked me, said I'd wear his brand until I gave him what he wanted. But I didn't break. Not then. And now he fears you'll reach someone who'll listen. Who would listen to me? Despair crept back into her voice. A Mexican woman with Apache blood branded as his property. He's already told everyone I'm his runaway mistress, that I stole from him, that I'm deranged. Even if I could prove who I really am, who would take my word over a cavalry captain's. Cheno considered this truth. In the world beyond these canyon walls, she was right. Her word meant nothing against a white officer's. But there were other forms of justice, older and more final than courthouse law. Rest now, he said, rising. I'll make medicine for the fever. He moved through the canyon, gathering what he needed: willow bark for pain, desert sage for cleansing, prickly pear for the burns he'd seen beneath the blood. His grandmother had taught him these things before his exile, knowledge that connected him to generations of healers. When he returned, Isabel had dragged herself to sitting position, back against a smooth boulder. In the fading light, he could see her more clearly, the proud set of her shoulders despite everything, the intelligence in those green eyes, the stubborn strength that had kept her alive this far. Why are you helping me? She asked as he prepared the medicine. You're Apache. I'm Mexican. Our peoples have been enemies for generations. Are we enemies? Cheno asked mildly, grinding willow bark between stones. No, but your people, they must have cast you out for a reason. Why risk more trouble for a stranger? Cheno was quiet for a moment, focusing on his work. I killed a man, he said finally. A white trader who came to our camp, found him with one of our young girls. The council said I should have brought it to them. Let them decide. But I saw my sister's face in that girl's tears, and He shrugged. Some choices we make in the moment. Live with them after. Isabel studied him. You regret it. Regret killing? No. Regret losing my place, my people every day. He brought her the medicine. But that girl lived still, free and unmarked. Sometimes that's enough. She took the bitter drink without complaint, then asked quietly, Do you think I'm a fool for running instead of dying? I think, Cheno said slowly, that Harding wanted you dead or broken. You're neither. That makes you dangerous to him. He met her eyes. Makes you valuable to anyone who stands against him. And you stand against him? My sister's spirit demands it. He paused. As does yours, I think. Isabel touched the place where the brand lay hidden. This mark, it burns all the time. Not just my skin, my soul. When I close my eyes, I see him standing over me with the iron. Smell the... She shuddered. Scars fade. Cheno said, even the deepest ones. Not this kind. All kinds. He pulled back his own sleeve, revealing old scars across his forearm. Cavalry saber. First time I fought soldiers. I was 12. Thought these marks made me less Apache, less worthy. My grandfather said scars are just the body's way of proving we're harder to kill than our enemies thought. He covered the marks again. Harding wanted to own you, but you're here, free, breathing. His mark failed its purpose. Isabel considered this, some of the tension easing from her shoulders. You speak like a philosopher. My grandmother would laugh to hear that. She called me thick-headed as a buffalo. A rare smile touched his lips. But exile gives a man time to think. Night was falling, stars beginning to pierce the deepening sky. Cheno built a small fire, keeping it low and smokeless, old habits of concealment. Isabel watched him work, seeing for the first time beyond her own pain. Tomorrow, she said suddenly, I want to wash it, the brand, properly. With your medicines, your prayers. I know it won't erase it, but maybe it could mean something different. Not his mark of ownership, but my mark of survival. Cheno nodded slowly. The old ways say every wound can be made sacred if we choose. Tomorrow, we'll begin. And after, will you help me get Papa's documents? They're hidden in the Sierra Madres. At least a week's ride. Dangerous territory. Dangerous for who? Cheno asked. A cavalry captain chasing ghosts through Apache land, or an Apache who knows every waterhole and hidden path? For the first time since he'd found her, Isabel smiled, small and fragile, but genuine. You're risking everything for someone you don't even know. I know enough. Cheno fed another stick to the fire. I know you carry truth that could save lives. Know you've suffered for refusing to break. Know my sister would haunt me forever if I turned away. He paused. And I know that sometimes the spirits put people in our path for reasons we only understand later. Isabel pulled the rough blanket he'd given her closer, wincing as it touched tender skin. In the firelight, she looked younger than he'd first thought, maybe 20 summers, maybe less, too young for the weight she carried. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me as more than this. She gestured vaguely at herself, at the hidden mark, at all of it. Rest, Cheno said. Tomorrow brings its own challenges, but tonight, you're safe. I give you my word. As Isabel finally surrendered to exhausted sleep, Cheno kept watch. Somewhere in the darkness, coyotes sang their ancient songs. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human suffering and human kindness alike. And in a sacred canyon hidden from the world, two wounded souls began the long journey from survival to something that might, eventually, resemble hope. The brand on Isabel's skin still burned, but for the first time since the iron touched her flesh, it didn't define her. In the morning, they would wash it with sacred water and healing herbs. They would speak new words over old wounds. And then they would ride toward the Sierra Madres, toward hidden truths and dangerous justice, together. Dawn came slowly to the sacred canyon, painting the walls in shades of rose and gold. Isabel woke to the sound of Cheno's quiet chanting, a prayer song that seemed to rise from the earth itself. She watched him through half-closed eyes as he prepared items near the spring sage bundles, stones worn smooth by water, herbs she couldn't name. You're awake, he said without turning. Good. The best healing happens when the sun is young. Isabel sat up carefully, her body still aching but the fever broken. I'm not sure I'm ready. Ready is something we tell ourselves we'll be someday. Chano faced her. Today is what we have. She nodded, understanding this truth. Ready was a luxury she'd lost the night Harding came to their ranch. The morning air was cool as she followed him to where the spring pooled clear and deep. Chano had built a small altar of stones, with burning sage sending fragrant smoke into the air. He gestured for her to sit on a flat rock beside the water. In the old way, he explained, we don't try to erase wounds. We acknowledge them, honor the survival they represent, then release their power over us. He handed her a bundle of sage. Hold this, breathe the smoke, let it carry away what no longer serves. Isabel clutched the sage, watching the smoke spiral upward. The familiar scent brought unexpected memories, her mother burning sage in their home, a practice her father had tolerated with fond exasperation. Tears came unbidden. Let them fall, Chano said quietly. Tears are medicine too. As she wept, he began to sing low, rhythmic words in Apache that she didn't understand but felt in her bones. The song seemed ancient, pulling something loose inside her chest. When he finished, the canyon was silent except for the spring's gentle voice. Now, he said, we wash the wound, not to remove it, but to reclaim it. Isabel's hands shook as she loosened her torn dress, revealing the brand for the first time in daylight. The H inside its circle stood out angry and red against her skin, crude and deliberate. She heard Chano's sharp intake of breath but didn't look at his face, couldn't bear to see disgust or pity. Instead, she felt his hands gentle and clinical, examining the scar tissue. It's healed well, considering no infection. The pain you feel now is memory, not flesh. Memory can hurt worse than flesh, she whispered. Yes, he dipped a soft cloth in the spring water. Which is why we face it. The water was shockingly cold against the brand. Isabel gasped, then steadied herself as Chano carefully cleaned around the mark. He worked in silence, treating the scar with the same reverence he might show any sacred thing. When satisfied, he reached for a small pottery jar. Prickly pear and pine pitch, he explained, spreading the salve over the brand. For the skin, but the real medicine comes from you. I don't understand. Chano sat back on his heels. This mark was meant to claim you, define you as property, but you're here, free. So now you decide what it means. Speak new words over it. Give it new purpose. Isabel looked down at the brand, gleaming with salve. For months it had been her shame, her secret horror. But sitting here in this sacred place, tended by unexpected kindness, she felt something shift. You, she said to the scar, voice growing stronger, are not his mark anymore. You're mine. Proof that I survived. Proof that I didn't break when he tried to destroy me. She took a shuddering breath. You're my promise to Papa, to Mama, to Diego. I'll live. I'll get justice. I'll make their deaths mean something. The words hung in the morning air like a vow. Chano nodded approval and helped her arrange her dress to cover the brand again. But something had changed. The scar was still there. Would always be there. But its meaning had transformed. Teach me, Isabel said suddenly. About the plants, the healing. I want to learn. A rare smile touched Cheno's lips. The desert is a good teacher, if you listen. They spent the morning walking the canyon, Cheno pointing out plants and their uses. Desert willow for headaches, brittle bush for pain, creosote for wounds. Isabel absorbed it all with the same intensity she'd once brought to her father's books, finding comfort in practical knowledge. You learn quickly, Cheno observed as she correctly identified a healing cactus. Papa always said I had a mind like a steel trap, her smile faltered. He taught me to read, write, figure numbers. Said education was the only weapon they couldn't take from you. She touched her ribs unconsciously. He was wrong about that. Was he? Chino challenged gently. You remembered where he hid the papers. Kept that knowledge through everything Harding did. Seems your father's weapon held true. Isabel considered this, then nodded slowly. You're right. Papa would be glad to know that. As the sun climbed higher, they returned to the camp. Cheno had caught rabbits in the early hours, and he taught Isabel how to prepare them over the fire. Simple tasks, but she found peace in the routine, the basic rhythm of survival. Tell me about the papers, Cheno said as they ate. Everything you remember. Isabel closed her eyes, calling up her father's words. There's a box canyon in the Sierra Madres, near Copper Creek, a cave behind a fall of rocks that looks natural but isn't. Papa took me there once, years ago. Said if anything ever happened, if soldiers came, I should run there and get the papers to his friend in Tucson, Judge Mackenzie. Mackenzie's dead, Cheno said bluntly. Killed 6 months ago. They said Apache raiders, but... He shrugged. But it wasn't Apache. Isabel's voice was flat. Let me guess he was making trouble about land grants, asking questions about military contracts. So the stories say? Isabel laughed bitterly. Then what's the point? Everyone who could help is dead or bought. Harding's won. Has he? Cheno challenged. You're alive. The papers exist. There are others who oppose men like Harding Mexicans who've lost land. Apache who've seen too many false raids. Even honest whites who's sick of the corruption. But they need proof. And you think Papa's papers are enough? I think they're a start. Combined with your testimony, with what you survived. He met her eyes. Truth has its own power, even in a land built on lies. Isabel stared into the fire, weighing hope against experience. It's at least a week's ride to the Sierra Madres. Harding will have patrols out, bounty hunters. And if we somehow get there, somehow retrieve the papers, then what? Who do we trust? One step at a time. Cheno counseled. First, you heal. Then we plan. The desert's been here long before Harding. We'll be here long after. We use its patience. I'm not sure I have patience left in me, Isabel admitted. When I close my eyes, I see them Papa trying to protect Mama, Diego running to help, and then... She shuddered. I want Harding dead. Is that wrong? It's human. Cheno's voice was neutral. But death's too easy for men like him. Better to destroy what he values, his reputation, his power, his place in the world he's built on blood. You sound like you've thought about this. 2 winters of exile give a man time to think about many things. He paused. My grandfather used to say revenge was like drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die. But justice is medicine for the whole tribe. Isabel absorbed this wisdom, finding unexpected comfort in its truth. Your grandfather sounds wise. He died fighting soldiers at Apache Pass, but his words live on. Cheno stood, scanning the canyon walls from habit. Rest now. Tomorrow we start preparing for the journey. You'll need strength, skills. I'll teach you to read sign. Move silent. Find water where none seems to exist. If we're to reach the Sierra Madres alive, you need to think less like a rancher's daughter and more like Apache. And you? Isabel asked. What do you need? Cheno was quiet for a long moment. Purpose, he said finally. For 2 winters, I've existed between worlds, belonging nowhere. Maybe helping you brings meaning to my exile. Maybe my sister's spirit can rest if I keep another woman from her fate. We're using each other then, Isabel said, but not unkindly. Is that bad? You need my knowledge of the land, the ways of survival. I need... He paused, searching for words. I need to remember who I was before exile. A protector. A warrior with purpose beyond mere survival. Isabel stood, moving carefully but with growing strength. Then we help each other. I learned to be Apache in the wild. You remember how to be human in the world. She held out her hand, a gesture both formal and intimate. Partners. Cheno looked at her outstretched hand, this Mexican woman with Apache blood, marked by violence, but not broken by it. In her green eyes, He saw determination that matched his own, a will to survive that had kept her alive against all odds. Slowly, he clasped her hand, feeling the calluses from ranch work, the strength in her grip. "Partners," he agreed, as the sun reached its peak, filling the canyon with light and shadow. They began planning in earnest, maps drawn in the dirt, routes discussed, dangers catalogued. The brand on Isabel's skin still ached, but its meaning had shifted. No longer Harding's mark of ownership. It had become her mark of survival, her promise of justice. And in the sacred canyon, two unlikely allies prepared for a journey that would test every skill, every ounce of courage they possessed. The Sierra Madres waited, holding secrets that could topple powerful men. But first, Isabel had to learn to move like shadow, think like the desert, survive like the Apache. And Chano had to remember that even in exile, even bearing the weight of all he'd lost, there was still something worth fighting for beyond mere survival. The healing had begun not just of flesh, but of purpose, of hope carefully kindled in the ashes of loss. The night was thick with memories as Isabel sat by the dying fire, unable to sleep. Chano kept watch nearby, his silhouette barely visible against the canyon wall. 3 days had passed since the healing ceremony, 3 days of learning desert ways, and still the past haunted her dreams. "You cry out in your sleep," Cheno said quietly, not turning. "Names, Diego, Maria." Isabel drew her knees to her chest. "My brother, my mother." The words came hard. "I haven't spoken of that night, not fully. Sometimes wounds must bleed before they heal." She stared into the embers, gathering courage. It was late September, the harvest moon. Papa had been nervous for weeks, men coming by the ranch, asking questions. That night, he made us all sleep in the main house instead of our separate rooms. "Just for safety," he said. Cheno shifted slightly, listening. "The dog started barking just after midnight. Papa grabbed his rifle, told Diego to protect us. My brother was only 16, but he—" Her voice caught. "He tried so hard to be brave. When the soldiers kicked in the door, Diego stood in front of Mama and me with Papa's old pistol. His hands were shaking so bad, he couldn't even cock it properly." The fire popped, sending sparks into the darkness. Harding came in last, after his men had control. So calm, like he was arriving for dinner. He looked at Papa's books, his papers spread on the desk, and smiled. "Working late, Delgado planning more lies to spread about honest soldiers." Isabel's hands clenched. Papa tried to reason with him, said he only wanted justice for the murdered families. The stolen cattle blamed on Apaches. That's when Harding shot him. No warning, no anger even. Just raised his pistol and she pressed her palms against her eyes. "Your mother?" Chano asked gently. "Fought like a wildcat when they grabbed me. Clawed at their faces, screaming curses in Spanish and Yaqui. She was small, but fierce. One of the soldiers. He got tired of her fighting, used his rifle butt." Isabel's voice went flat. "She didn't get up again." "And your brother?" "Diego tried to run at Harding after Mama fell. Brave, stupid boy. Harding's sergeant put a blade between his ribs. Let him bleed out slow while they tore the house apart looking for Papa's evidence." Tears flowed freely now. "He kept calling for me, 'Isa, Isa,' but they held me down, made me watch him die." Chano moved closer, sitting just within the fire's light. "Then Harding took you." "Back to Fort Buchanan first, his private quarters." Her hand moved unconsciously to her ribs. 3 days he kept me there, trying to make me tell where Papa hid the papers, when I wouldn't." She shuddered. The brand was the last thing, when he realized I'd die before talking. His final mark of ownership, he called it, said even if I escaped, everyone would know I belonged to him. "But you did escape." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. His mistake was thinking a branded woman was broken. He got careless the 4th night, drunk on whiskey and cruelty. Left his knife too close. I opened his sergeant's throat and ran. She met Cheno's eyes. "I'm not sorry for that killing. Does that make me a monster? Makes you a survivor. Cheno's voice held no judgment. The monster is the one who murdered your family. Isabel nodded slowly. Papa used to read us stories from the Bible. David and Goliath, the righteous defeating evil. But in real life, Goliath usually wins, doesn't he? He has the soldiers, the law, the power. David had one stone. Cheno reminded her, you have your father's papers. Sometimes one stone is enough, if aimed true. You have more faith than I do. Not faith, experience. Cheno stirred the fire back to life. My grandmother told me a story once, a single Apache woman whose village was destroyed by Spanish soldiers long ago. Everyone dead, husband, children, parents. The soldiers thought they'd killed her too, left her for dead among the bodies. Isabel leaned forward, drawn by the tale. But she lived, crawled away, healed herself with desert medicine. The soldiers had taken sacred objects from her village, items of power. She could have spent her life mourning, hiding. Instead, she learned Spanish, dressed as a Mexican woman, worked her way into the governor's household as a servant. Took 5 years, but she got close enough to poison the man who'd ordered the attack. They never suspected the quiet serving woman. What happened to her? Disappeared into the desert. Some say she became a medicine woman, helped other survivors. Others say she turned into an owl, still watching over her people. Cheno shrugged. The point is, she didn't let grief stop her. She used it, shaped it into purpose. Isabel was quiet, absorbing the story. Do you think I can do that, turn this pain into something useful? Already have. You're here, alive, preparing to retrieve evidence that could save lives. Your family spirits know this. Sometimes I feel them, Isabel admitted. Especially Diego, like he's just beyond the firelight, waiting. Mama's presence too, softer but there. And Papa. She smiled sadly. I hear his voice when I practice the plant names you've taught me. He loved learning, loved teaching. The dead stay close when they have unfinished purpose. Cheno said, they'll rest when justice is done. A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another. The desert night was alive with small sounds, mice in the brush, wind through stone, the eternal whisper of the spring. Isabel found unexpected comfort in this wild music. Tell me about your sister, she said. You've carried my grief. Let me carry some of yours. Cheno was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Ayana means eternal blossom. She was beauty and laughter, everything soft in a hard world. Our parents died when she was small. Fever took them. I raised her best I could, with grandmother's help. His voice carried old pain carefully controlled. She wanted to learn white ways, thought understanding them would protect our people. I taught her English, some reading, too trusting, that girl. When the soldiers came that day, she went to greet them, thought her words could build bridges. Harding's men. Under his command, he stayed back, let his soldiers do the work. They were supposed to be checking for stolen cattle, found none, so they made their own entertainment. His jaw tightened. I was coming back from hunting, saw the smoke. By the time I reached camp, he stopped, the silence saying everything. I'm sorry, Isabel whispered. She was wearing the dress I'd traded for, blue like sky with small flowers. Proud of that dress. They left her in the dirt, torn and... He stood abruptly, facing the darkness. I went mad, tracked them for days. When I found the one who'd hurt her most, I took my time, made sure he knew why. That's what the council couldn't forgive, not the killing, but the way of it. Some men deserve slow deaths. Maybe, but it cost me my place, my people. Been walking between worlds since. Apache to no one, enemy to whites, nothing to myself. He turned back. Until I found you. Seeing that brand, knowing Harding marked another woman like property, felt like Ayana's spirit pushing me. Help her, she seemed to say. Do for her what you couldn't for me. Isabel rose, moving to stand beside him. Maybe we're both here for reasons beyond ourselves. Your sister's spirit, my family's need for justice. Together we might do what neither could alone. Together. Cheno tested the word, found it stronger than expected. A Mexican woman who fights like Apache, an Apache who lives like neither. We make a strange pair. Strange times call for strange alliances. Isabel touched his arm lightly. Thank you for listening, for not looking at me differently now that you know everything. How could I look different? You're the same woman who survived Harding, who's learning desert ways, who'll retrieve her father's truth. The past shapes us but doesn't define us. You sound like Papa again. He was a philosopher too, in his way. Wise man. His teachings live in you. Cheno studied the stars. Dawn comes soon. We should rest. Tomorrow we start preparing for the real journey. Your body's healed enough, but your skills need work. The Sierra Madres won't forgive mistakes. As they returned to their separate sleeping places, Isabel felt something had shifted. The weight of memory remained, but shared now, bearable in its division. Her family's ghosts seemed calmer, as did the rage that had driven her these past weeks. Cheno, she called softly. Do you really think we can do this? Get the papers. Find someone to believe them. Stop Harding. I think, he replied carefully, that your father hid those papers believing his daughter would be strong enough to use them. I think Harding fears you, or he wouldn't hunt so hard. And I think my sister's spirit brought us together for purpose. He paused. Whether we succeed or die trying, at least we act. That's all anyone can do. Isabel lay back, looking up at the canyon walls that held them safe. Somewhere beyond, Harding searched, but here, in this sacred space, she'd found an ally who understood loss, who didn't see her brand as shame but as strength survived. Together they would attempt what seemed impossible. Her family's voices seemed to whisper approval on the night wind. Justice might be distant, dangerous, even unlikely, but it was no longer impossible. And that, Isabel thought as sleep finally claimed her, was enough to keep fighting for. The journey toward the Sierra Madres began before dawn, the desert still holding night's coolness. Isabel rode Cheno's paint horse while he moved on foot beside her, reading the land with eyes trained since childhood. 5 days out from the sacred canyon, the terrain grew rougher, more unforgiving. Soldiers, Cheno said quietly, studying tracks in a sandy wash. Half a day old, 8 horses, moving fast. Isabel's hands tightened on the reins. Harding's men. Maybe, or maybe just patrol. Either way, we go careful. They altered course, taking a harder route through broken country where horses would struggle. Isabel had learned much in their preparation how to move quietly. Find water sign. Read the sky's warnings. But this was her first real test. By noon, the heat was brutal. They sheltered in the shadow of tall rocks, sharing water sparingly. That's when they herded horses approaching from the east, voices carrying on the still air. Cheno gestured sharply. Isabel slipped from the horse, leading it behind a cluster of boulders. They crouched, barely breathing, as the riders passed below their position. She recognized one voice and her blood went cold. Sergeant Morrison, she whispered after they'd gone. Harding's second, the one I... She touched her throat. Thought you killed him. I was certain. The blood. She shuddered. Then you wounded him bad enough he remembers. Makes him dangerous man with a score to settle, thinks different than one just following orders. They waited another hour before moving, taking an even more circuitous road. As they climbed higher into the foothills, the landscape changed. More pine, cooler air, different dangers. This was disputed territory, where Apache, Mexican, and American claims overlapped in blood. It was near sunset when they saw the smoke. Not campfire smoke, too black, too much. Cheno stopped, nostrils flaring. Stay here, he ordered. But Isabel was already sliding from the horse. We go together or not at all. He looked ready to argue, then nodded. They approached carefully, using every bit of cover. What they found made Isabel's stomach turn. A small Mexican settlement, perhaps 5 families' worth, lay in ruins, adobe walls blackened, gardens trampled, bodies scattered like broken dolls. The attack was recent, some fires still smoldered. "Apache?" Isabel asked, though she already knew the answer. Cheno knelt by distinctive tracks. "Shod horses, army boots. But look," he pointed to deliberately placed arrows. "Apache design, but wrong somehow. Planted. Real Apache don't waste arrows in dead bodies for show." "Another false raid." Isabel's voice was bitter. "More excuse to drive out natives, take land." A sound made them both freeze soft crying from a collapsed chicken coop. Chino moved toward it carefully, Isabel covering him with her father's pistol she'd taken from the ranch. Inside, huddled beneath dead birds, was a child. A girl, maybe 6 years old, eyes huge with terror. "It's all right," Isabel said in Spanish, holstering the weapon. "We won't hurt you." The child just stared, too traumatized for words. Isabel reached out slowly, and the girl suddenly lunged into her arms, clinging desperately. Over the child's head, Isabel met Cheno's eyes. "We can't leave her," she said. "Can't take her either. Slows us down, makes us easier to track." "Then we move slower." Isabel's tone brooked no argument. "I won't leave another child for the coyotes. Not after Diego." Cheno studied her face, saw the resolve there. "The Mescalero have a camp 2 days north, not my clan, but they might take her in. Then we go north first." He didn't argue further. Understanding this was a battle already lost. They searched the ruins quickly, finding little. Whoever had done this had been thorough. The child, who finally whispered her name, was Rosa, clung to Isabel as they prepared to leave. That's when Cheno found it a cavalry button, torn off in struggle, hidden beneath a dead man's hand. He showed it to Isabel. "Fort Buchanan insignia," she said grimly. "Harding's men did this?" "Or meant us to think so. Either way, changes nothing. We move now. Questions later." They traveled through the night, Rosa silent on the horse with Isabel, Cheno ranging ahead and behind, erasing their tracks. The child's presence changed everything. No more risky shortcuts, no pushing through exhaustion. Every choice now carried triple weight. Dawn found them in a grove of cottonwoods by a hidden spring, while Cheno kept watch. Isabel tended Rosa, coaxing her to drink, eat a little dried meat. The girl's dress was torn, revealing bruises, but nothing worse. Thank God. "Men came at sunset," Rosa finally whispered. "Dressed like soldiers, but some painted like Apache. Papa tried to talk to them. They laughed. Then—" She buried her face in Isabel's shoulder. "Did you see their leader?" Isabel asked gently. "A tall man with pale eyes." Rosa shook her head. "Only soldiers. They kept saying Apache while they—" She couldn't continue. Isabel held her close, fury building. This was Harding's way: create atrocities, blame the Apache, justify more violence, a cycle feeding itself on blood and lies. "We need to reach the Mescalero quickly." Cheno said, "This child is witness to their deception. If Harding learns she survived—" He didn't need to finish. Isabel knew what happened to inconvenient witnesses. She looked down at Rosa, seeing Diego's innocence, her mother's face. Another life in danger because of proximity to truth. They pushed harder the next day, Rosa growing fevered despite their care. The child had seen too much, endured too much. Isabel bathed her face with precious water, sang half-remembered lullabies her mother had known. "You're getting attached," Cheno warned that evening. "Is that wrong?" "Dangerous. We can't keep her. Isabel, our path leads to fighting, maybe dying. She needs safety." "I know." Isabel smoothed Rosa's hair. "But for now, she needs to believe someone cares if she lives. That's all any of us really need." On the second night, they smelled wood smoke controlled. Careful. Cheno made a sound like a nighthawk. Waited. An answer came from the darkness. Mescalero, he said. Now we see if old treaties hold. 3 warriors materialized from shadow, weapons ready. Cheno spoke in Apache, gesturing to Rosa, to the ruins they'd left behind. The warriors listened, faces unreadable. One, older with gray threading his hair, finally nodded. They'll take her, Cheno translated. Their camp has women who'll care for her, but they want to know, are we responsible for alerting soldiers to their presence? Tell them about the false raids, Isabel said. Tell them about Harding, about my father's papers. They deserve to know who their real enemy is. Cheno spoke at length. The warriors' faces darkened as they listened. When he finished, the elder spoke directly to Isabel. He says your father was known to them a fair man who traded honestly, respected boundaries. They grieve his death. Cheno paused. They offer to help, if we need it. Tell them we're grateful, but our fight might bring more trouble to their people. The elder laughed at the translation, spoke again. He says trouble comes whether invited or not. At least knowing its true face gives them advantage. Cheno listened further. They've lost people to these false raids too, if your father's papers can prove the deception. Then we have allies, Isabel finished. They transferred Rosa to the warrior's care. The girl clung to Isabel one last time. Will I see you again? Rosa whispered. I hope so, little one. Be brave. These are good people. Isabel kissed her forehead. Live. Grow strong. Remember the truth of what you saw. As the mescalero melted back into darkness with Rosa, Isabel felt the weight of purpose double. Not just her family now, all the innocents caught in Harding's web of lies. You did right, Cheno said as they prepared to resume their journey. The child has a chance now. We gave her to strangers, to people who understand survival. Sometimes that's the kindest gift. He studied the stars, calculating direction. Sierra Madres are still 3 days hard riding. Now Harding knows we're in the area those burned settlements will draw patrols. We go careful, go smart. And if we meet his men, then we fight, but better to be shadows until we have your father's truth in hand. They moved through the remaining darkness, 2 figures against an enormous landscape. Behind them, a traumatized child began her journey toward healing. Ahead, mountains held secrets that could topple kingdoms built on lies. Isabel touched the hidden brand beneath her clothes, not in shame now, but as reminder. Every life destroyed by Harding's greed strengthened her resolve. Rosa, her family, Cheno's sister, countless unnamed dead all demanded justice. The Sierra Madres loomed closer, dark with promise and threat. Somewhere in those peaks, her father's legacy waited, and with it, perhaps, the stone that could finally bring down Goliath. The cave mouth yawned behind the false rockfall exactly as Isabel's father had described, invisible unless you knew where to look. They'd reached it just after dawn, exhausted from 3 days of dodging patrols and navigating treacherous mountain paths. Cheno worked carefully to move the stones while Isabel kept watch, her father's pistol ready. Clever, Cheno admitted as the entrance revealed itself. Natural looking. Your father chose well. Inside, the cave stretched deeper than expected, dry and cool. Isabel lit a torch from their supplies, the flame revealing her father's final legacy, a metal strongbox wrapped in oilcloth, waiting in a natural alcove like a secret heart. Her hands shook as she unwrapped it. The lock was sturdy, but she had the key worn on a cord around her neck all these months, the one thing Harding hadn't found when he'd searched her. Wait, Cheno said suddenly, head cocked. Horses, many of them. The sound of approaching hoofbeats echoed off canyon walls. Isabel's heart raced as she fumbled with the lock. It clicked open just as voices became audible outside. Tracks lead this way, Captain. Fresh ones. Harding. Isabel's blood turned to ice. "Then we finally have them," Harding's cultured voice replied. "Morrison, take 5 men around the north approach. No one escapes this time." Chano grabbed the torch, dousing it in dirt. In the sudden darkness, Isabel clutched the box against her chest. Papers rustled inside her father's meticulous records, the truth that men had died for. "Deep cave," Chano whispered. "I don't know. Papa only showed me the entrance." "Then we find out." They felt their way deeper, the box awkward in Isabel's arms. Behind them, soldiers had found the entrance. Torchlight flickered on cave walls as Harding's men pushed inside. "They're trapped," Morrison's voice, rough with anticipation. The sergeant had survived her knife after all, and his tone promised revenge. The cave narrowed, then opened into a larger chamber. Chano pulled Isabel behind a formation of stalactites just as soldiers rounded the bend. In the dancing torchlight, she could see uniformed figures spreading out, searching. "Delgado's daughter," Harding called out, his voice echoing. "I know you're here. That Apache mongrel, too. Come out now, and I might let him die quickly." Isabel's grip tightened on the box. Beside her, Chano had gone utterly still, a predator calculating odds. "I'm disappointed, Isabel," Harding continued, moving deeper into the cave. "After all I did for you, marking you as mine, you run to savage arms, though I suppose mixed blood seeks its own level." Rage flared hot in Isabel's chest. Chano's hand on her arm was all that kept her from revealing their position. "Check every crevice," Harding ordered. "They're here somewhere." A soldier passed within feet of their hiding spot. Isabel held her breath, pressing against cold stone. The box in her arms felt heavier than mountains, all those deaths. All that truth, worthless if they died here. Then, shouting from the entrance, gunfire erupted, echoing deafeningly in the enclosed space. War cries in Apache mixed with soldiers' curses. "Ambush!" someone screamed. "Apache attacking!" The mescalero, Isabel realized. They'd followed, kept watch, chosen this moment to strike. "Hold positions!" Harding roared, but his men were already retreating toward the entrance, where the fighting sounded fierce. In the chaos, Chano moved, one soldier, separated from the others. Never saw the knife that opened his throat. Another turned just in time to meet Cheno's tomahawk. Isabel pressed against the wall, protecting the box, as her companion became death incarnate. "The woman," Morrison spotted her, raising his rifle. Isabel dropped the box and drew her pistol in one motion, months of Chino's training flowing through her. The shot took Morrison in the shoulder, spinning him around. His rifle discharged into the cave ceiling, bringing down a shower of rocks. "Move!" Cheno grabbed both Isabel and the box, hauling them toward a narrow passage he'd spotted. They squeezed through just as Harding's voice rang out, "After them, I want that box!" The passage led to another chamber, this one with multiple exits. Behind them, soldiers struggled to follow, their larger frames and equipment slowing them. The sound of fighting from the entrance had intensified. The mescalero were giving them precious time. "This way," Isabel gasped, remembering something. "Papa mentioned water-carved tunnels. If we can find them." They ran through twisting passages, following the sound of dripping water. Isabel's shoulder burned where she'd scraped it on stone, but she clutched the box like life itself. Behind them, torches bobbed in pursuit. The tunnel opened suddenly onto a ledge above an underground stream. The drop was perhaps 8 feet survivable, but risky in the dark. "Can you swim?" Cheno asked. "Yes, but the papers—" "Wrapped in oilcloth. They'll survive." Shouts echoed closer. No time to debate. Cheno took the box, secured it to his back with a rope, then helped Isabel over the edge. She dropped into shockingly cold water, going under briefly before finding her footing. Cheno followed just as soldiers burst onto the ledge. Gunfire exploded above them as they let the current carry them downstream, deeper into the mountain's hidden veins. The stream carried them through darkness, broken only by occasional shafts of light from above. Isabel struggled to keep her head above water, lungs burning. Just when she thought she couldn't continue, the current swept them into a pool where pale daylight filtered through an opening. They dragged themselves onto a rocky shore, gasping. The box had survived, Cheno's knots holding true, but they could hear echoes. Harding's men had found the stream, were following. "Can you climb?" Cheno pointed to the opening above, perhaps 20 feet up a sloped wall. "I'll manage." They climbed, Isabel's waterlogged skirts threatening to pull her down. Halfway up, her foot slipped. Cheno caught her, steadying her against the rock until she found purchase again. Above them, blessed daylight grew stronger. They emerged on a mountainside far from where they'd entered, the cave system having carried them through the heart of the ridge. Below, they could see smoke rising, the aftermath of battle. "The Mescalero," Isabel breathed. "We have to help them?" "They knew the risks, fought so we could escape with this." Cheno touched the box. "Honor their sacrifice by surviving." As they watched, riders emerged from the smoke, not soldiers, but Apache warriors, retreating in good order. Some carried wounded, but they moved with purpose, not panic. The ambush had cost Harding's men dearly. "There." Cheno pointed to a natural shelter in the rocks. "We rest, check the papers, plan our next move." In the shelter, Isabel opened the box with shaking hands. Inside, wrapped in additional oilcloth, were her father's records. Maps showing real Apache territories versus attacked settlements. Lists of stolen supplies, diverted shipments. Letters between Harding and Confederate sympathizers, discussing weapon sales and fabricated raids. Names, dates, amounts, all in her father's careful script. "This is it," she whispered. "Proof of everything. The false raids, the murdered families, the stolen government supplies, even correspondence about selling Mexican captives south." Her voice hardened. "Enough to hang him 10 times over." "If we can get it to someone who'll listen." Cheno cautioned. "Papers are just paper without power behind them." "Then we find power. There must be someone, a federal marshal, an honest officer, a newspaper that won't be bought." She looked at him fiercely. "We've come too far to fail now." A sound made them both freeze, horses approaching from below. But the rider who appeared wore Apache dress, leading extra mounts. One of the Mescalero warriors, his arm bound but mobile. He spoke to Cheno in rapid Apache, gesturing toward the north. "They offer escort to their winter camp." Cheno translated. "Say we've earned sanctuary. From there, they know traders who might carry messages to Santa Fe, where federal authorities investigate army corruption." "And Harding lost 6 men in the ambush, more wounded. He's retreating to Fort Buchanan." The warrior spoke again, and Cheno's expression darkened. "But he's sending riders ahead, spreading word that you're a madwoman who murdered her own family, that you forged papers to cover your crimes. He's trying to poison the well before we can reach it." Isabel felt the weight of despair settling over her. Even with proof in hand, Harding was ahead of them, using his position and connections to destroy her credibility before she could speak. "Then we need more than papers," she said slowly. "We need witnesses, survivors from the attacked settlements, soldiers willing to testify. Maybe even..." She thought of Rosa, safe now with the Mescalero. Children who saw the truth. Cheno nodded slowly. "Build a case too big to dismiss. Not just papers, but voices. Many voices. It'll take time. Months, maybe." "Then we take months. Harding thinks you're just a branded woman running scared. Let him think it while we gather strength." He met her eyes. "This is war now. Not just for justice, but for truth itself." Isabel closed the box, her father's legacy safe for now. Looking out at the mountains stretching endlessly before them, she felt the shape of the fight to come. It would be long, dangerous, with no guarantee of success. But she also felt something else, not alone anymore. The Mescalero warrior waited patiently with horses. Cheno stood beside her, solid as the mountains themselves. Somewhere, Rosa grew strong among protectors, and in her arms, she carried the seeds of Harding's destruction. "Then we go to war," she said simply. As they mounted the horses and followed their guide north, Isabel touched the brand beneath her clothes one last time. Harding had marked her as property, but she'd transformed that mark into something else. A promise written in scar tissue that his crimes would not go unanswered. The mountains swallowed them. 3 riders carrying revolution in a metal box behind them. Harding raged in his fortress, not knowing that his carefully built empire of lies had already begun to crumble. Truth, Isabel was learning, could be a patient weapon, and she had all the time in the world to aim it properly. The forest burned orange in the afternoon light, smoke rising like prayers to an indifferent sky. 2 months had passed since the cave. 2 months of building alliances, gathering witnesses, sending careful messages through trusted traders. Now it all came down to this, a final confrontation in the pine forests below the Mogollon Rim. Isabel checked her rifle again, hands steady despite the battle raging below. Beside her, Chino watched the tactical situation unfold with a warrior's eye. They'd known Harding would come, had counted on it when they'd made sure he learned of their location through carefully placed informants. "There," Cheno pointed. "Harding's taking personal command of the left flank. He's desperate." And he was... The federal marshals from Santa Fe were only days away, coming to investigate the evidence Isabel had sent through Father Miguel, the mission priest who'd agreed to help. Harding's only chance was to silence them before the law arrived. Below, the battle was fierce but not chaotic. Mescalero warriors used the forest expertly, appearing and disappearing like smoke. Mexican settlers who'd lost family to false raids fought alongside them. Even a handful of discharged soldiers who'd grown sick of Harding's corruption had joined their cause. "He's got maybe 30 men left," Isabel observed. "The others desert when they see Apache and Mexican fighting together. Hard to maintain the lie when your enemies unite." A rifle ball splintered bark near her head. Morrison had spotted their position, was directing fire toward them. The sergeant had survived her bullet in the cave, though his arm hung useless now. "Time to move," Cheno said. They'd planned this carefully. Draw Harding in, make him commit his forces, then strike at the head. Without their captain, his remaining men would scatter. The corruption network would collapse. They worked through the forest, Isabel moving with the silence Cheno had taught her. Around them, the battle's tide was turning. Harding's men, used to attacking defenseless settlements, found themselves outmatched by motivated fighters who knew the terrain. Then she saw him. Harding stood in a small clearing, shouting orders, trying to rally his breaking lines. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with dirt and rage. For a moment, Isabel was back in his quarters at Fort Buchanan, feeling the brand sear her flesh. Her hand moved involuntarily to her ribs. "Your fight," Cheno said quietly. "I'll watch for Morrison." Isabel stepped into the clearing, rifle raised. "Captain Harding!" He spun, his pale eyes widening then narrowing. "The Mexican witch, come to die with your savage lover. Come to see justice done." Her voice was steady as mountain stone. Harding laughed, drawing his pistol in a smooth motion. But months of survival had changed Isabel. She moved as Cheno taught her, sideways, using trees for cover. Harding's shot went wide. "You think killing me changes anything?" Harding snarled, pursuing her through the trees. "I've already sent dispatches. You're a madwoman, a murderer. Your papers are forgeries. No one will believe." Isabel's shot cut him off, taking him in the shoulder, spinning him around. His pistol flew into the undergrowth. She emerged from cover, rifle steady on his chest. "They'll believe Rosa," she said calmly. "The child who survived your massacre at San Miguel. They'll believe Private Collins, who kept his own records of your false orders. They'll believe the dozen other witnesses we've gathered." She stepped closer. Your empire of lies is already dead. Captain, you just haven't stopped breathing yet. Harding clutched his wounded shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. But his eyes remained cold, calculating. You won't kill me. You're not a soldier. Just a marked woman playing at war. You're right. Isabel lowered her rifle slightly. I'm not a soldier. I'm the daughter of Eduardo Delgado, who you murdered, the sister of Diego Delgado, who bled out calling my name, the woman you branded like cattle. Her voice hardened. And I've learned that death is too easy for men like you. Movement in the trees. Morrison, trying to flank them despite his useless arm. But Cheno was there, silent as shadow. The sergeant's eyes widened just before the Apache's knife found his throat. This time, Isabel's work was finished properly. Harding saw his last ally fall, and something finally broke in those pale eyes. Fear, the foreign emotion he'd inflicted on so many, now visited him. The federal marshals will be here in 2 days, Isabel continued. You'll live to see trial, to have your crimes read aloud in court, to watch your name become synonymous with corruption and murder. She smiled coldly. To know that a branded Mexican woman brought down the great Captain Harding. You think you've won? Harding spat blood. There are others like me. This territory runs on blood and lies. You've changed nothing. Maybe, Isabel felt Cheno move beside her, a steady presence. But we've changed something. Apache and Mexican standing together, truth louder than lies, your victims given voice. She touched her ribs, where the brand lay hidden. And every woman you marked learning she's more than her scars. The battle was ending around them. Harding's forces scattered, those not dead or captured fleeing into the forest. Mescalero warriors emerged from the trees, some wounded but victorious. Mexican settlers raised a cheer that echoed off the ridges. Take him, Isabel told the arriving fighters. Keep him alive for the marshals. He has much to answer for. As they bound Harding's wounds and hands, he stared at Isabel with uncomprehending hatred. You were nothing, he rasped. Just another Mexican girl to use and discard. How dare you? I dare, Isabel cut him off. Because you taught me something valuable. Captain, you taught me that when law fails, when justice sleeps, ordinary people must wake it. With blood if necessary, with truth always. They dragged him away. This man who'd built a kingdom on suffering. Isabel watched him go, waiting to feel triumph. Instead, she felt only tired, empty, as if something vital had drained away with the battle's end. It's done, Cheno said quietly. Part of it. Isabel turned to face the battlefield, where fighters tended wounded and gathered dead. Harding falls, but the system that created him remains. The lies about Apache raids, the hunger for land, the belief that some lives matter less, all still there. Then we keep fighting, different ways now. Your father's papers will be published. People will know the truth. Some will believe, others will choose comfortable lies. Isabel felt the weight of future struggles settling on her shoulders. But you're right, we keep fighting. A young Mescalero warrior approached. Speaking rapidly to Chino, Isabel caught enough to understand minimal losses on their side. Harding's force destroyed. The way clear for federal authorities to arrive. As the sun set behind the western ridges, painting the forest in shades of blood and gold, Isabel stood among the victorious, Apache, Mexican, even Anglo allies united by shared injustice. It wouldn't last. Old hatreds ran too deep. But for this moment, this battle, it had been enough. Your family can rest now, Cheno said, reading her thoughts as he often did. Justice comes. Partial justice, Isabel corrected. Papa would say it's a start. Nothing more. That real justice means changing hearts, not just laws. Your father sounds wiser each time you quote him. He was. I just hope I can be half as wise, half as strong. You branded yourself with survival. Cheno reminded her, transformed his mark into your power. That's its own wisdom. Isabel nodded, then made a decision. I need to see him once more, before the marshals take him. She found Harding bound to a tree, guarded by Mexican settlers who'd lost family to his false raids. His shoulder was roughly bandaged, his uniform stripped of insignia. He looked smaller somehow, just a wounded man rather than the monster of her nightmares. "Come to gloat?" he asked weakly. "To make a promise," Isabel said. She pulled her dress aside, revealing the brand for the first time since that morning in the sacred canyon. The H in its circle stood out pale against her sun-darkened skin. "You marked me as property, but I'm marking you with something worse, the knowledge that your mark became my strength. Every time I doubted, I touched this scar and remembered why I fought." She covered the brand again. "So thank you, Captain Harding. You created your own destroyer." Leaving him to contemplate that truth, Isabel walked back to where Cheno waited with their horses. Tomorrow would bring federal marshals, trials, the slow grinding of official justice. But tonight, under stars that witnessed all human folly and courage alike, she'd won something more precious than legal victory. She'd reclaimed herself not despite the brand, but through it, transformed victimization into power, survival into purpose. "Where now?" Cheno asked as they mounted. "Santa Fe first, to see this through." Isabel looked at him, this Apache warrior who'd become more than ally. "Then, I don't know. There's work to do, stories to tell, children like Rosa to protect." "Long road ahead." "Yes." She touched the hidden brand one last time, then let her hand fall. "But we walk it together." "Together," Cheno agreed. They rode from the battlefield as darkness fell, leaving behind blood and victory alike. Ahead lay uncertainty, struggle, the slow work of building truth in a land poisoned by lies. But Isabel carried her father's words, her family's memory, and her own hard-won strength. The brand remained on her skin, but she'd written her own meaning over Harding's cruel inscription, and that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. 6 months had passed since Harding's trial and execution. The spring of 1874 brought new life to the Pueblo settlement where Isabel and Cheno had made their home. She stood in the doorway of the small adobe schoolhouse, watching children practice their letters. Apache, Mexican, and mixed-blood youth learning together. An impossible dream made real. "Maestra Isabel," little Rosa called out. "Is this right?" She held up her slate, showing carefully formed words in both Spanish and English. "Perfect, mija." Isabel smiled at the girl who'd grown stronger and brighter in the months since that terrible night. Teaching her, teaching all of them, had become Isabel's new purpose. Cheno appeared at the edge of the plaza, returning from a meeting with territorial officials. His expression told her the news before he spoke. "The government accepted the new treaty terms," he said quietly. "Recognized boundaries based on your father's true maps. The false claims are void." Isabel felt tears threaten. Papa's work, finally bearing fruit. He would be proud. "Of the treaty. Yes, of you, more." Cheno touched her arm gently. "There's something else. A letter came through the trader." She took the sealed envelope, recognizing the federal seal. Inside, an offer to serve as official translator and mediator for the territorial government, working to prevent the kind of tragedies that had taken her family. "They want to hire me," she laughed, disbelieving. "A branded woman." "A woman who brought down corruption, united enemies, speaks for the voiceless." Cheno's rare smile appeared. Even bureaucrats recognize value eventually. That evening, they sat by their small fire as the sun painted the western sky in shades of rose and gold. The same colors that had witnessed so much pain now blessed their quiet peace. "Will you accept?" Cheno asked. "I don't know. The children need me here. And you." She stopped, still uncertain after all these months how to name what grew between them. "I go where you go," he said simply. My exile ended when I found purpose again. Home isn't a place, it's who stands beside you. Isabel studied his face, this man who'd saved her, taught her, fought beside her, who saw her not as a marked woman but as herself complete. The Apache way forbids marriage outside the people. The old way. But we make new ways. You and I, Apache and Mexican, warrior and teacher, building bridges where others built walls. He took her hand. If you'll have an exiled warrior with too many scars and too few words. If you'll have a branded woman with too much anger and too many causes to fight. Your anger brought justice. Your causes saved lives. He traced the back of her hand with his thumb. And your brand reminds us both that survival can become strength. They were married at sunrise 3 days later. Father Miguel officiating while Mescalero and Pueblo witnesses looked on. Isabel wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully mended, while Cheno dressed in a mixture of Apache traditional and Mexican formal that somehow suited perfectly. Rosa served as flower girl, scattering desert wildflowers with fierce concentration. The other students sang, their voices blending languages and traditions into something entirely new. As Father Miguel spoke the final blessings, Isabel touched the place where her brand lay hidden beneath wedding finery. Still there, would always be there. But now it was just one part of her story, the painful chapter that led to all the rest. You're thinking of him, Cheno said quietly as they stood together afterward, accepting congratulations. Of all of them, Papa, Mama, Diego, even Harding. She met his eyes. Without the horror, would we have found this, built this? She gestured to the mixed gathering, the impossible made real. The spirits work in ways we don't understand, but I think, he paused, choosing words carefully. I think your family sent me to find you. My sister sent you to save me, and together we honored them all. A year later, Isabel stood before a gathering of territorial officials, translating between Apache leaders and government representatives. Her brand ached, it always did when she worked too long in the heat, but she wore it now like armor, hidden but strengthening. The work was slow, frustrating, often seemed hopeless. Old hatreds died hard. Men like Harding were replaced by others, subtler but no less dangerous. Yet progress came, a fair treaty here, a prevented conflict there. Children learning that enemy was a word taught, not born. Cheno worked beside her, teaching young Apache men alternatives to raiding, helping Mexican settlers understand their indigenous neighbors. Together they built fragile bridges over canyons of mistrust. Their own child grew within her now, a new life that would know both heritages, belong to both worlds. When she told Cheno, he'd wept the first tears she'd ever seen from him. Boy or girl, they'll know their history. Isabel had promised. All of it. The pain that brought us together. The love that kept us strong. On quiet evenings, she still taught at the school. Rosa had become her assistant, helping the younger ones with their letters. Other survivors of false raids found their way to the settlement, building new lives from the ashes of old ones. The brand never faded. Sometimes Isabel stood before her small mirror, studying the H in its circle, remembering the night it was burned into her flesh. But the memory no longer held power over her. She'd kept her promise, transformed the mark from ownership to ownership of herself. Mama Isabel, Rosa asked one evening as they closed the school. Why do you touch your side sometimes when you think no one's looking? Isabel considered the girl almost a woman now, with her own sorrows overcome. I carry a reminder, she said carefully, of a time when someone tried to tell me who I was, but I decided for myself instead. Does it hurt? Sometimes, but it also reminds me how strong we can be, how marks meant to break us can become our power. She hugged the girl. You have your own marks, invisible ones, but look how bright you shine despite them. As they walked home through the plaza, Isabel saw Cheno teaching a group of young men traditional hunting skills. He caught her eye, smiled, that rare expression that transformed his warrior's face into something softer. The sun set behind the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire, the same sky that had witnessed her family's death, her own brutalization, her desperate flight, but also the sky that had blessed her healing, her justice, her unexpected love. The past is always with us, her father used to say, but we choose whether it imprisons or teaches us. Isabel touched her brand one last time as she entered her home, their home, built with adobe and hope. Inside, the smell of cooking food, the sound of Chino's quiet humming, the promise of new life growing within her. The scar remained, would always remain, Harding's mark, burned deep. But she'd written her own story over his cruel inscription. A story of survival becoming strength, of pain transformed to purpose, of love blooming in the desert of loss. The brand that was meant to define her as property had become the proof of her freedom earned in blood, sealed in justice, celebrated in the quiet victories of daily life. And that transformation from victim to victor, from branded property to free woman, was the greatest triumph of all. The desert wind sang through the plaza as night fell, carrying the laughter of children who'd never know the weight of false ownership, the joy of families rebuilding after loss, the quiet strength of two souls who'd found each other in the wilderness and chosen to walk together toward whatever dawn awaited. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the harsh beauty of the Old West. If you're listening to this story, I'd love to know where in the world you are. Please share in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more tales of love, survival, and redemption from America's frontier. What did Isabel's transformation mean to you? Share your thoughts. Every story finds new meaning through the hearts that receive it.